you see that fancy footwork?
I did not.
I almost launched without the modesty shield in place.
I was trying to get my book to stay open to a particular page, and I was failing. And so I'm sitting here, and I've got the cleaning lady money, which means I almost used it as bookmarks, but the idea of using 20s as bookmarks, I feel, would give the wrong idea for how much money game designers make.
Right, yeah.
When, in fact, this money is sitting here so as to guarantee we don't spend it on food or electricity, so we can actually pay the cleaning lady.
Right. That's how you budget when you've got no budget.
I mean, and I'm okay saying this even with this live. There was a point where my wife and I were so poor that we would host role-playing games at our house, and my wife would cook, or I would cook, and people would come and bring $5 because our home-cooked meals were better than they could pick up at a drive-thru, and we would use that money to make more than we needed so that we could survive on the leftovers from the game for the rest of the week.
That is probably a common refrain. I'm betting there are other folks who... I wasn't necessarily hosting a tabletop roleplay experience, but I definitely have had my fair share of potlucks.
Yeah. In fact, we had one friend who, if he wanted in fact, it's our current roommate, if he wanted me to run a game that was not scheduled, he would sometimes say, "Hey, if I came by with a frozen lasagna, would you run a game?"
That's awesome. Hey, well, it's a good way to, it's good that folks know that they can bribe you. You know, it is ThursdAGE, and a good Thursday unto all y'all who are popping in. This is our little pre-stream, pre-funk, where we just kind of sit and just chill with this very chill ambient music in the background.
This is totally the music from a scene from Leverage.
It really is. I like it. You know, I like today's topic too.
But food age.
That's great.
Says Josie. Yeah, I think there's I could probably do a 10-minute seminar on each and every monster in the bestiary, and if we run out of topics later in the year, I suppose I might do that. But for the moment, I just want to talk about things that might not be obvious that you can do with the bestiary that apply to all age games, even though I will be talking about Fantasy Age.
Nice. Yeah. And a point I made on Twitter only moments ago when I was talking about the debut of my new game, Owen and Age. Pronounced Ownage.
Ownage?
Yes. It's a new game that you can only play during ThursdAGE, 2 p.m. Pacific, here on all the channels.
But that makes it sound like you're going to get owned, which is not, I think...
Or Owen's gonna get you. I mean, not you, yeah. Owen. I'm talking about you. You're the Owen. I think it'll be a fun game.
I'm the Owen in this example.
You are the Owen of the Owen Age.
I noted online the other week that if I ever moved to Gotham, I would have to carefully warn people that even though my name can be mispronounced Owen Stevens, I am not, in fact, a loan shark who people owe money to. And that for my safety and everyone else's, I will be staying away from chemical vats and high power lines. And
yeah, also anywhere Dick Tracy characters are hanging around, like that's another. It sounds like you'd be coming right out of that world.
Yeah, it's interesting how easily you can take Dick Tracy villains and turn them into Batman villains.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's ThursdAGE, and I'm your disembodied buddy, Troy. And I apologize in advance. You know, Owen, I'm wearing cords, and I'm also wearing a vest, like not like a dress vest with a bow tie or a cummerbund, but like a puffy vest. And it's very slick, like you can hear it. And so I just kind of sound like a windy zipper. Sort of zipping around, so my apologies to you all. The great Rafiki says it's ThursdAGE, and it is. Like 1 minute after. What do you think, Owen? Should we dive in?
You're in charge of those things. I'm just here to be pretty.
That is very true. And speaking of pretty, let's drop the modesty shield and say hello. And
hi, folks.
It's good to see you, my friend. And so I discovered this in doing my research, which I do for every single one of these shows.
Oh yeah, definitely, hours and hours.
Yeah, the prep time alone is just daunting. But Bestiary is not a journal within which you write poems to your bestie.
No, that's a bestiary. It's subtly different.
Yeah, and so what am I going to do with all these journals I have? I was gonna read them for the whole program.
You ever heard of blue booking?
No.
As a role playing term. Okay, so welcome to analog gaming. In the 90s, one of the trends that existed in tabletop role playing game was called blue booking, where you took the blue book exam books that are common in America. They're similar cheap paper notebooks for other areas. And if you were having a scene or a moment that people did not want to have to do out loud, or it was secondary, it was going on in the background, or you were talking about, telling each other jokes during the fight, you would write down what your character did in the blue book and then pass it to the next person, and they would write down a response. They would pass it to the next person. This was called blue booking. And then you had a permanent written record of this background stuff that was going on.
I see. And so what you're saying is hand it to someone, don't read it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I see. Loud and clear, sir. Hey, I want to say hey to everybody. We've got all of our friends are here today. The great Rafiki's hanging out. We've got Rain's hanging out. Brian F. Irving's here, says good ThursdAGE unto all of you. Jonesy, of course, is here. Aaron Alston for the win. Now, that does sound familiar. I think we might have discussed this during Mutants and Masterminds Monday, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Alston is one of the, sadly passed, was one of the great game designers of the generation when I was first getting into the industry, and he happened to live in Texas for quite a while. So as an Okie boy, I would go to conventions to listen to Aaron Alston speak. And in sort of a full circle kind of thing, in the 90s at one point, I was at a convention with Aaron Alston, as was my friend and longtime gaming partner, Carl. And Carl saw Aaron just standing in the lobby around about 1:00, and Carl said, "Follow my lead." And so he walked up to Mr. Alston, and I followed, and he said, "Mr. Alston, we're big fans of yours. Can we offer to take you to lunch?" And Aaron Alston was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." So we went to lunch. We bought lunch with Aaron Alston, and we sat and we talked about gaming and the game industry, et cetera, for about an hour. In 2015, I think, I was at a convention here in Oklahoma. I was a guest for my RPG work, and Aaron Alston was also a guest, and there was a coffee clutch where people who were guests would sit around and people could come talk to you. But it was like at 8:00 in the morning on a Sunday, so not a lot of gamers were getting up to come to the coffee clutch because they had gamed until 7. Right. So he and I were sitting at the gamer guest of honor table, and I mentioned that I and my friend Carl, who was there at the coffee clutch, had taken him out to lunch like 10, 15 years earlier at a nearby convention. And he went, "Oh, you are the guys that took me to a Wendy's." Yes, that was us. We're the guys that took you to a Wendy's.
I love it. I love this industry for that very reason. The tabletop roleplay space is just filled with, people, normal people. I mean, normal. I mean, I don't want to sound like I don't know the people that are in the industry, but, just people that are approachable and having some fun. There is, we've got a lot of people watching right now, and that is fantastic. I want to say to folks who are streaming, if you are out there in the world and you're streaming a Green Ronin product, whether it's, something powered by the Adventure Game Engine, or if it's, one of our many other delightful titles like, Mutants and Masterminds and all of that good stuff, let us know on Twitter, and we'll add you to our exclusive streaming group, of which many people who are watching right now are a part.
Should I create one?
Yes. So
Alexa's talking to you.
Yeah, she is. which I had muted, but I didn't expect her to talk back. Shall we get into it?
Let's get into it.
All right. I hope you all did your reading. Our text today is the Fantasy Age Bestiary. And this is, as we discussed, the Best Practices show. And I want to talk for a bit about why I called it the Best Practices show. I could do 10 or 15 minutes on each and every one of these monsters. Some of them I could do a half hour, an hour. And if you wanted 57 ways that you can use the Mano War in your game, then that would be a good use of your time, but it would only cover the one thing, the Mana War. So that leads to the question, how do I make this broader and more utilitarian so it's useful for more people and applies to more than just Fantasy Age, because a lot of this is general stuff that you can apply to any age game. So I called this Best Practices. One of the things that Troy has done from time to time is surprise me by putting up a piece of art, always genius masterwork art, it's stunning, that has some sort of critter and says, hey, Owen, stat this. And I almost always go running to the bestiary, because rather than come up with something from scratch, I just want to take some options from in here, reskin them, kit bash them, throw them in a blender and turn them into puree, and then put them in a mold and wait for them to gel.
Delicious.
So that is it, isn't it? My analogy sounds like soup. Is it soup yet? So that's the sort of thing I want to talk about today for best practices, ways to get the best out of this game, and little hints and tricks and things that are particularly useful, mostly as a GM, but also if you're a player, there's some stuff in here. And I want to start with Here There Be Monsters.
Nice. I was going to say, Owen, this will be particularly useful for Brian F. Irving, who is a Blue Rose game, a Modern Age game, and a Fantasy Age game.
That's a lot of age.
I love it. I love it, Brian. You are an age hero.
I my immediate knee jerk was to go, what? No Expanse, slacker. But that would just be a joke. I totally wouldn't be serious.
Right.
So there is. I really need to get this one for Modern. Yeah, but by all means, pick it up. Pick them all up. Pick up all the ages, says Josie.
Yeah, come on.
So, in the Here There Be Monsters, it talks about what's in this book, how to use this book, the anatomy of a monster. I want to touch on that for a moment because a lot of people will just gloss over this. It talks about what is the information in each monster entry here. So it's got the name of the monster, a short piece of fiction showcasing how the adversary will interact, a general description, its history, behavior, discussion of any variants, its stat block or game statistics, multiple adventure seeds. So with all of that in each entry, those are tools for you as a GM or in some cases a player to use. So if you are a game master and you can't think of a game, or you're stumped, or you feel like you've been doing the same thing that everything has been, hey, you're walking along the road and you are jumped by a wandering crypt and it tells you to give you all its money or it will spill undead on you. If you've just been doing that one plot point too often, you can take any appropriate critter in here and look at the adventure hooks and use those adventure hooks differently than they are in the book. If you want to. So, for example, I happen to have flipped open a troll. We have a lovely piece of troll art.
Nice.
And I'll talk about art best practices here in a sec. You can look at the plot points here. Hands off my sheep, my bodyguard, and ooh, shiny. And you don't have to use these with trolls. Now, if a troll happens to be what you're looking for, if what you need is a minor threat that is not a goblin or orc and does some more interesting things, you can take these as is and run it with a troll, or you could run it with any critter in here, right? My bodyguard talks about trying to recruit trolls for an army. Well, a evil tyrant could recruit anything for an army, right? Anything that you can negotiate with, you can try and recruit. So you could go through and say, hey, it's actually an admiral and they're doing sea devils. It's actually a necromancer and they are trying to recruit reapers. And there's a whole host of reapers to try to get. And the reaper art is also right.
I like it. Or you could do like hands on my sheep.
Exactly. So that is the first best practice, right? Mix and match as needed. You can take all of this stuff. I mean, we're talking about multiple adventure hooks per monster. And a lot of these are not drilled down to only be appropriate for their storyline. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at Merfolk and they're talking about the Lady of the Rocks, a narrow channel or river has recently been claimed by a siren. You might think, well, that's a water-specific thing, but you can use that same lot. If you wanted a troll, but you'd used all the troll plot hooks, you're looking at the Merfolk, and you say, oh, a narrow channel or river has been claimed by a siren. What about a bridge claimed by a troll? That's a classic, and you can back import these things. So that's the first thing I want to note. GMs frequently feel that there just isn't enough content out there to run as many games as they want. And we're busy. We understand. You don't want to craft everything from scratch. The tools and hints in there are, for a lot of people, all you need to throw things together, right? I take a stat block, I take a concept from a plot hook, I reskin it, and a lot of them work really well for the sort of wandering group of adventurers, which are fairly standard in fantasy. Some of them are things that have happened recently, and I find that extremely useful because if you are running a game and you want a troll to be a danger in an area, and players are like, well, why? We're told that the merchants caravan comes through here all the time. How do they deal with the troll? When you look at some of these plot hooks, it says something like a siren has taken over a river recently. You can think, oh, I can apply that to any choke point in travel. That the whole reason perhaps a troll has set up on the bridge is that caravans have to go through there. He's seen them go through there, so he has recently moved in. And you can even use that as how the players find out about something. A caravan leaves town in the morning, comes back in the afternoon and says, yeah, we were going to head over to Secondton and try and sell our chocolate battle axe molds there. But there's a troll that has taken over the bridge and we can't get through. And if anyone can take care of the troll, we'll happily pay you X number of copper or chocolate, however you would prefer to be paid. That's the sort of connection of things where you can, if you're stumped, just read through, just ignore the monster stat blocks for starters. Read through the adventure seeds in here, and there are scores of adventure seeds that you should be able to modify to your own purposes. Another thing I mentioned was the art. There's obviously a ton of art in here. It's all good art, obviously. One of the things that can happen to fantasy players is they can get really, really, really used to, oh, it's a dragon. That dragon is red. Ergo, I know it breathes fire and it can cast spells and it talks, etc. You can take this bestiary, put a few post-it notes over the name and the important stat blocks of a critter, and you can say, okay, you see 5 of these coming at you. They're roughly the size of sheep.
Oh.
And your players, if they have not memorized this book, have no clue what that thing is. But it doesn't look friendly, right? That is a useful function of the art. If it's jumping at you and wait, are those mushrooms growing on its back? What the heck? That gives you a way to not just tell your players, okay, 5 ghouls jump into the room. Well, if you say 5 ghouls, there are things they already know about them. If you say 5 of these things are in the room, yes, they may recognize those as ghouls, but since you're not saying ghoul, they also have to wonder, oh, I wonder if he's using that for a troll. I wonder if he's using that as a giant. How tall are they? And they will ask interactive questions. So the art can be a super useful resource so that, is it a fire ogre, or is it a demon, or is it a giant? Your players don't automatically get that information. And, then if they're going to make a test and say, hey, I am well versed in this area, I've got various lores, can I make a test and see if I recognize the critter? They are then interacting with the rules and with the information their character has instead of just information they, the player, have. And I personally find showing a piece of art to be a useful mood setter, right? It's sometimes it can be a little in your head when you're talking about, there are 5 orcs and they are minor threats and they all have exactly the same equipment. And people just don't think of those as creatures. They have this image of a opponent-sized box sliding towards them with no personality, no differentiation, nothing interesting. So I find the art to be one of the best parts of this book.
I like that. Rain says, I see you have come across the best creature in the bestiary. Thank you. Is that toothy mushroom mouth? Rain, you have to let us know. And then, I love this, John. I agree with you. This must be what it's like to watch Mozart compose.
Yeah, but see, watching Mozart compose is boring because he's just scribbling on a piece of paper. Now, if you listen to him compose, all right. So, there are some high-end notes of ways to get more out of this book. Now, for me, the most underused utility of this book is as a reskinning toolkit. One of the things that I happened is at one point I mentioned, hey, if you're trying to do such and so a monster, you can just use a Hydra. Surely there's a Hydra in this book. And so I tried to flip through, and I got to G, which is the Groot sling, and then H should have been Hydra, and it goes straight to Iron Maiden. Oh no, there's no Hydra in this book. So you immediately, let's say I want to do a Hydra. What do? Well, you start by picking a stat block that is roughly what you want. And by that, I mean what threat level, right? Because the threat level means that your various abilities and focuses, your speed, your damage, your weapon bite, those will all be in yes, it was a grow. In roughly the right range for the people that you're dealing with. Then you get to special abilities. And what you need to do is ignore the special abilities on a critter that aren't appropriate to what you're doing and grab a few that are appropriate. And then you can create a whole new monster. So let us say that I want not just a typical Hydra, not a hey, this room has a Hydra and two magic pairs of eyeglasses and a left boot that allows you to jump, but only one direction. This is instead the Hydra, right, that guards the Golden Fleece, or the Hydra that is going to be at the end of a big adventure. This is a named Hydra. Pardon me. The whole region is called Hydraria because it's got a giant Hydra in it. Then I need a major threat for what I'm doing. So I'm flipping through the book, and I see the carnivorous plant, which has a flesh-eating tree entry, is a major threat. And it has two kinds of attacks. It's got a bite attack and a tendril attack. Okay, well, that sounds good. Major threat, bite attack, tendril attack. Bite makes sense, and either multiple tails or long necks can be used as tendrils, so I like that. I look through and I see favored stunts. Giving monsters favored stunts is a great, simple way to give them flavor in combat. And it is not that your players will necessarily know, oh, one of his favorite stunts is skirmish. It's that stunt is going to come up more because it doesn't cost them as many stunt points, and because you, the GM, are constantly staring at favored stunts: skirmish, swallow, knock prone, tendril. And the swallow stunt is written in as a new stunt on this monster, on the flesh-eating tree. So you can pick a few. Skirmish sounds good. Knock prone sounds good. Then you look through the other special abilities. Heat sense. I don't really need my Hydra to have heat sense, so I'll ignore that. Rooted. All right, it's good to know that there's a rooted ability in here, so if I have some other carnivorous plant, I can use it, but I don't really need that. Bark skin. It doesn't really have bark that fire-based damage penetrates. Pull, no. Swallow stunt, swallow whole. All right, my Hydra can swallow things whole. I'll go ahead and give it that. Tendrils, yeah, those are good. And then what about breaks? No, that's too specific. So I've only got two so far, right? I've come up with just the swallow stunt and some favorite stunts, and that's not enough for my critter. So I flip the page. I'm doing a Hydra, right? And I look at my Chimera, which again, cool art. And I look at the Chimera special abilities. breath weapon. Oh, well, there we go. A chimera is also a major threat, so its breath weapon should be appropriate for what we're doing for our Hydra. So I can just take this ability and paste it on to my other monster. Charge, don't really need it. Many-headed. Oh, there we go. There's a many-headed ability. The chimera's heads can each attack. It can make as many attacks as it has heads, using any of its attack options as a single major action, but it can't make more than 1 bite or gore per head or more than 2 claw attacks in this way. So I can say, okay, I want my Hydra to have 6 heads. I have the many-headed ability. I know that the Chimera could have made a claw, 2 claws, a bite, 2 claws, a gore, and 3 bites. That's 6 attacks, so I can use these damage values for when it's doing that. Hey, John. John Lighthouser happens to.
Real quick, I was, as I'm often want to do, doing some research and checking out, things people talk about. And, John's got a whole YouTube page that he just streams and does all kinds of great stuff. I'm a big fan. I just can't believe I hadn't seen it before now. So my apologies.
John's name is on this book, right on the front cover. So
yeah, that in itself is enough to go pick up that PDF.
So there's a many-headed ability, and then there's a poisonous bite stun. So I can make a Hydra out of any stat block, strip away its special abilities that are appropriate, and then flip through the book to find special abilities that work for it. And by having a general idea of what's in here and a willingness to know, okay, I just grab things I need, the special abilities in here don't have like point values where you're trying to have exactly 12 points of special abilities in a monster. You do want to think about not combining too many types of things that do the same thing, right? Like if something has a built-in armor rating, you don't also want to give it a power where people have to make a saving throw to attack it unless the original monster had both, right? You don't want to, and I mean a test, not a saving throw. The D20 runs deep sometimes.
That's right. Yeah.
There are also useful things in here that just give you ideas for how to handle issues that the rules don't seem designed to handle. Like the Imp, which is a little unhelpful demon guy, has a lend power stunt. The Imp can lend an allied spellcaster power as a special stunt. For every 2 stunt points the Imp spends, he can give one ally 1 stunt point to use on their next action for a spell stunt. That concept, loaning out stunt points, isn't really in the basic rule book. It doesn't show up in a lot of other places. And then if you're the game master and you're reading through this, you're like, oh, I can take that concept and apply it to anything I want. So if I decide, okay, the players are going to have an animated shield as an ally, it's literally a floating shield that wanders around with them and does stuff. And I am going to use some sort of monster for that shield. I'm looking for a good one. I know we've got some in here. Wow, we've got some creepy stuff in this book. That's the other thing. When you flip through, you can just discover there's weird, creepy things that you've never thought of before.
A quick question. Do you ever just do that? Do you ever just crack open a book and just kind of refresh your memory on all of the content within?
All the time, although usually with a purpose, right? Usually it's something like, hey, I think I am going to run a game. I want some ideas for the game. And while I leave my brain in neutral, if I have any lack of motive, if I don't immediately know what I'm doing, I can then think, let me flip through a book and see if anything sparks an idea. Also, of course, I'm the Fantasy Age developer, so I am literally paid to know this stuff. So yes, if it's working hours and the writing isn't happening, I will sometimes crack open a book and flip through it as a refresher of what's in here. All right, so there's this Man of War thing, which is obviously a walking animated suit of armor, which has a bunch of special abilities. It's a moderate threat. That sounds like kind of what I want for my animated shield. So I say, okay, I am going to have this Man of War. I will strip out all of its steel weapon and magical weapon and always at the ready. I don't need any of that. But I'm going to give it this lend power stunt, but instead of applying to magic stunts, I will pick specific combat stunts, right? Stunts that will let you gain AR or avoid an attack or increase your defense. Because the idea has come from the imp, but I don't have to do it the way the imp does it. That is the most important best practice. Once you see how these sort of official professional rules, and I shouldn't air quote for official, they are official, but the point is, once you see how these have been used to generate effects, you can take that concept and apply it to other things. There are also special stunts in here, which are brand new stunts just for that monster. There's an Aura of Terror stunt on the Demon Lord. So if you want to have a creature that is frightening and horrifying, you can say, okay, I'll look at the Aura of Terror stunt and I will scale it to whatever monster I'm doing. Let's say I want my dragon to be horrifying and terrible. Well, I will find something in here to serve as my dragon, and I'll give it that Aura of Terror stunt. And that will give me the effect I'm looking for. The other nice thing about doing this as a GM is that it means that your players may be familiar with the way things work, but they won't have memorized every monster you face just because they might have a copy of this book, right? The ability to create, John knows that the dragon is in the basic rule book. He's 100% right. The ability to create appropriate, interesting things with the majority of the rules content generated for you, just shuffle it together in a new way, is a great way to have things that can be unexpected and still work well within the rules for the players.
Love it. Bottoms up.
Yeah, I got to caffeinate and keep my throat lubricated. There are some other things that I think it's important to keep in mind when putting these things together. The things in the bestiary are all designed from a baseline point of view. And what I mean is these have been designed with certain assumptions about what your player composition is going to be. And if you are deviating from those baseline assumptions, that's great, but it means that you are also going to have to change what you are putting up as a threat for your players. I will give you an example. The core rulebook, the base rulebook, assumes that you've got 3, 4, 5 players, something like that. And it doesn't have to be exactly 4. 3 players is very close to the same. But if you are playing with 2 players or 8 players, and they all have characters, what they can handle is going to be a very different range of things. In the case of having too few players, you may have to give them lesser threats, or do something like say, okay, I'm going to use the exact same rules for this monster, but I'm only going to give it half as many hit points because I do not want it to last as long because there are only 2 of them. If you've got 8 players, there is going to be a temptation to say, well, instead of minor threats, I always throw moderate threats. Instead of moderate threats, I'll always throw major threats. That can be a good way to have a lot of players chewed up and spit out by your high threat monster. So sometimes you're going to be better off doing the reverse, for example, kicking in more hit points, or just throw twice as many things. Instead of there being 1 Groot slang, you put in 2 Groot slang. It is also worth looking at the beefing up adversaries section, which tells you how to make things elite, heroic, or epic. Again, you can take that and do it in reverse. You can, instead of adding 1 to any 3 abilities and adding focuses and increasing health, you can subtract 1, not from any 3 abilities, but from 3 relevant abilities, remove 2 focuses, reduce health, and perhaps remove a novice talent or a degree down from a talent. And that gives you a less dangerous foe. And you can look at the elite, the heroic, and the epic rules on how to scale up and just reverse them for scaling down. That is, from my point of view, the most important stuff about this book. If you're looking for things to do that sort of templating I was talking about, if you look at the back, there's a big old section on modifying monsters. Reading through this word for word is super useful. It's got combining special abilities, but it has a lot of typical abilities. So aquatic and armored and being a berserker and being big. I don't think it has the terrifying aura. I don't look. No, so they aren't all in here. But it's a good big list of things that you can flip through to give you an idea of how to modify stuff. There's a Clockwork Modifier that just allows you to take any monster and turn it into a clockwork version of the monster. So if you want the construct to look like and act like a crocodile, you can just take our crocodile right up, which didn't have we don't know what a crocodile looks like. Throw Clockwork on it, you've got a Clockwork Crocodile. It's a really straightforward system. And you can also take, for minor threats, you can always reskin our beasts. So there are some moderate threats in here. The bear is a moderate threat, which I think is fair.
Is it a bear or a bear?
Bear. B-E-A-R, bear, as in polar or Kodiak. It is a moderate threat.
Gotcha.
It's a bear. There's a reason humanity invented armor covered in spikes for hunting bears, right? Bears are dangerous.
They are typically known, maybe in our modern time as maybe more than a moderate threat.
Yeah, but not if you can throw fireballs. The tiger is also a moderate threat. The viper snake says threat minor, higher for more poisonous snakes. So most of the animals are minor threats for good reason, but there are a couple of moderate ones in there. Even the wolf is a moderate threat. So
okay.
This can also be a great way if you want to have a group attacked by a pack of wolves, and you look at it and you're like, oh, the wolf is a moderate threat. If I throw in a pack of wolves, I'm going to tear these characters apart. You can say, okay, instead of a pack of wolves, I'm going to say this is a local, smaller coyote-like creature, and I will use the stats for a boar, and I will just change the gore to a bite. Done. And then you can have a minor threat that looks like a wolf, or for that matter, even easier, there's a dog, right? You can just use the dog stats as small, less dangerous wolves.
So I want to unpack that a little bit. So you started kind of talking about balance and how you don't want to overwhelm your party, and that's just not a lot of fun for anybody, including the GM ultimately. So when you're creating that. Oh, yeah, I guess that depends, really. I mean, how much pain are you? Yeah, I read you. But I'm curious, when it comes to, so some folks, like myself included, you start to kind of talk about the math of things, and I break out into a cold sweat. What are some approaches to, not only come at this with that balance in mind, but then also to course correct when you go, oh, okay, this is clearly not, this is a little bit more pain than I had hoped.
So first of all, when I've got a new group of players, a new group of characters really, or when people have just recently leveled up, or if we haven't played for a long while, I will almost always start by lowballing them. Unless I am super comfortable with the rule system and feel like I know exactly how far I can go, I will generally start by saying, hey, even though the basic rule book says that for this many players at this level, they can handle a moderate threat, and they can probably handle 2 moderate threats as a major threat. I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to start with a pack of wolves, and I'm going to use the stats for dogs, and I'm not even going to tell them that, just so I can see how it goes, so I can get a feel for how are they operating. This is especially true when I'm trying anything new, right? If I have looked at some of the books in Fantasy Age layers, and I'm using some layer stunts. So I'm saying, okay, this is a dense underbrush. The small Ard dire wolves, Ard wargs, can duck under the brush easily. So I'm treating that as a layer stunt. They are not slowed down, but you are. If I'm doing something like that for the first time, I will almost always start erring on the side of not as difficult as the game system says they can probably handle. Another thing you can do if you're wrong, if things are too easy, you just beef it up in the next encounter. Let the players have a win. It's fine. If it's too hard, you can always do something like, oh my goodness, these Ard wargs I have created are tearing the players apart, and then a player gets a stunt and does critical damage, you can just say, oh, well, these are animals that are here to feed on you. You just critted the pack leader, having just decided it's the pack leader. It will let out a yelp, and they will all run off because they don't know what your hit point total is. All
Right.
they know is that someone just took a mighty blow, so they are running off. And then
Yeah.
the players can go, oh, well, thank goodness we just barely made it out of that one.
Yeah.
If I'm really, really, really way off, and I have done this when I was first playtesting Fantasy Age, I literally had a fight where I was running from one of our short adventures, and I thought, okay, this should be fine for these players. And about 30 minutes in, half the characters are unconscious and half of them are dead. There's one person still standing and they're staggering around. I just looked at the players and went, guys, I was wrong. I messed this up. I am full up saying I should have known better than to throw this group at you. And in that case, they had a prophetic dream and they all woke up. They're like, well, we don't want to go that way. We'll all die if we go that way. Or your players might go, okay, clearly we need to be better prepared. So we'd better get some long spears and some rolling mobile shields. And we're going to have to make sure that we can build a small palisade at night, whatever. So that they've got the experience, but you say, I'm aware that this is people wake up and the last 3 seasons of Dallas didn't happen. And I'm dating myself for this reference.
Sure.
But you just, rather than try and pass it off as that was the plan all along, I will honestly, if I've just done a horrible job balancing stuff, just tell the players, I messed up. In order to save us from me ruining the game, I'm going to use this modestly cheesy narrative device so that you, the players, don't have to remember, oh, everything we said and did here didn't really happen. You just had a group community dream. It was a prophecy. It was an oracle. I may work out how that happened later. I may not. It may just be one of those things. And we will adapt from there. It's this is not a game where someone being one armor point too high or having +2 too much to an attack. Those won't totally tilt the balance, especially at higher levels. My one rule of thumb is don't throw a critter at players if it has an armor rating higher than their level. Even if it says it's a minor threat, if they are first level and it's got an armor rating of 5, I do not leave it with a 5. I just take the armor rating down to the level of the players, because even if they're going to win, it's going to take forever. And it's because our minor threats aren't specifically, hey, here's a first level minor threat, here's a second level minor threat, they're broader ranges for a reason. But I've just found that armor rating on foes makes a huge difference. By the same token, if you have found that your players are too squishy and you don't want to have to constantly modify villains, you can just do something like, oh, you've saved the cobbler elf king, and he rewards you all with cobbler cloaks that give you all +5 armor rating over and above what you would normally have. That is an extremely powerful set of items. But if the problem is that you've been doing too much damage to your players and you don't want to have to constantly modify what the monsters are, you just reward them for something with extra armor, and now the numbers should work out, and the players get the feeling of, hey, we have these nifty new cloaks.
All right, so that is in line with what Jahan's saying here, which is that that he'll put together contingencies, when there's a risky monster, and that's maybe they prevail, but when that risk is there, and like you were saying, if that balance is way out of whack, then there's something going on, right? So you should pay attention to that. But I want to go back to your thought on saying, okay, I've done something really horrible. I've made a horrible mistake, and so what's interesting about that is not necessarily advice that I think GMs have heard before, to be just open and say, oh wow, I've really done the thing here, and what's interesting about that is I think, like all the other things, you've got to prepare for that contingency. If you've done the thing and you need to kind of enact something that is some fantastic kind of resolution or a shift in the reality. To get that done well, you should be prepared to talk about not having been right. I mean, I think that's just brilliant. That's some solid advice just for life in general.
For me, yeah, it turns out everything I need to know about life I learned from role-playing games, which might explain why I'm doing so badly at life. So I personally think in a session 0 or session -1, when you're talking to your players about a game, one of the things you should do is say, hey, I am not super comfortable with the math. I am not an expert in generating new monsters. I will be throwing things together and kit bashing them. You might even say, hey, if I get a rule wrong, feel free to mention it once, but I don't want to spend 20 minutes looking something up in a rule book, so I may just say, make a test and move on. And when there are problems as a result of that, here's how I'd like to handle it. I personally think that you should never try to use in-game actions to correct out-of-game errors. So if the out-of-game error is, I thought that since wolves come in packs, and a wolf is a moderate threat, and first-level characters can fight wolves in other games, that I could throw 8 moderate threat wolves at these first-level characters, and now they're all laying dead. That is not a fault with the game system. That is not I ran the encounter wrong. That is not the players all decided to save up their stunt points and you can't do that. That is I, out of game, made a calculation that is utterly in error. So I don't want to try and fix that by saying, okay, well, everyone can make new characters. There's an option. It's in-game option. Or you're all unconscious and bleeding to death. Now let's see if anyone dies. We'll make the rolls and you just all are missing a finger because that much was nibbled off. I would prefer to just say, all right, break the storyline continuity of the game. Clearly, this has gone badly. This is not what I intended. I presume this is not the game you all enjoyed. Let's discuss what the best way is for us as a group to be satisfied, fixing it, and moving on. Sometimes things go horribly badly and no one made a miscalculation. The dice just hate someone. I had a player who in his first 2 or 3 games of Fantasy Age never got stunt points. The dice just never, ever, ever gave him doubles when he had a success.
In that game, yeah, it's rough.
And that is not a case where I would say, okay, we've made a mistake. That is someone's unfortunate bad luck beating them up. And that player felt like they weren't getting to interact with a chunk of the rules because part of the fun of Fantasy Age is stunt points. So we had a conversation about what would and wouldn't be fun with that. And the next time people got loot, that character ended up getting an item that gave him 1 stunt point per encounter. It's a magic item. Other people got different magic items. We had all discussed that this player wanted some options for stunt points. We just had that conversation and did it out of character and then gave it to them. And 1 stunt point per encounter lets him engage with those rules, but actually is not, unbelievably unbalancing. It's a lot like having a relevant favorite stunt come up. At the same time, another player ended up going, hey, I'm going to take the Fate Arcana because I'm seeing that the ability to manipulate stunt points and move luck around could be a big deal. So they did do sort of an in-character option, and that's another thing that can happen. If there's a weakness to players or to characters, I have personally found that characters that start at first level and play together as a group from 1st through 5th level are significantly more competent and dangerous than if everyone makes new 5th level characters, because they've had the experience of working together, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, developing tactics, evolving as characters. And so if one of them goes, hey, I noticed that we never need healing, as a random example. And if I built a 5th level character, I would have been putting all of my resources into getting as much healing arcana as possible, but it just doesn't come up for us. So I've got a little healing arcana for emergencies, but otherwise I spend it all on other things. The flip side of that is if someone said, I have built my character to be extremely resilient, so I'm sure we don't need healing. And it turns out that someone else is playing an unarmored barbarian that can do a lot of damage, but walks out of every fight looking like raw meat. And some of that's just play style. I think when linking this back to a Bestiary Best Practice, this is a book. This book has no feelings. It does not care. The people playing with you are people. They have feelings. They care. I personally will not put the book over the feelings of players. Now,
The book's not going to remember that you did that if you were just devoted to it. It's just going to forget. Yeah.
There are players who don't have fun if they feel that you are constantly deviating from the game, because overcoming the challenge of the game is part of the fun for them. That is an entirely legitimate play style. And I don't, for example, I try to avoid the temptation to constantly fudge rolls so the heroes always look cool and awesome, because that can reduce the emotional impact of feeling like you look cool and awesome. At the same time, I do, as a game master, try to modify my playstyle to the desires and needs and tendencies of my players. And the only way I can do that is if I have periodic conversations with them about what is fun, what isn't fun. You might see something as having been, this was an incredibly unsatisfying fight because I put all these bad guys out and the heroes defeated them in 3 rounds. And the players might be thinking, that was the best fight ever. We kicked their butt.
Right.
The flip side of that could be true. You could be thinking, hey, this was a great fight because they kicked their butt. They got to see how tough they are. And they're going, I spent all this time and effort being ready for a fight and it took 10 minutes. So you have to, everything for best practices, uses, tips, tricks, all of that is icing on the cake, and the cake is the social interaction between you and the players. You have got to have that at a level where you are able to modify it, talk about it. If you are providing chocolate peanut butter cake and one of your players has a peanut allergy, and yes, I am really torturing this analogy, it could be the best. It could be the best peanut butter cake in the world. They can't eat it. So you can't just constantly go, I'm modifying my peanut butter cake all I can. You've got to interact with them and say, what is fun for you? What is not fun for you? What are you enjoying? What are you looking for in this game? What do you expect? Those are all session 0, session 1 questions, but it is worth going back and reviewing them periodically.
Agreed.
If you've got a monster...
What I really need right now is a peanut butter cake. Desperately.
Just make a chocolate cake and put an extra cup of peanut butter in it. You'll be fine.
Smart.
I had another thought and it totally escaped me because now I'm thinking about peanut butter. Nope, it's gone. It's totally gone. I'm going to watch this show later and think that's what I was thinking, but it is gone now.
Too. Yeah. So you're saying, if you have this peanut butter cake and you just can't. Yeah. No. I'm trying to draw the line for you and I can't do it.
It's okay. I think people get the point, which is that all of these tips and tricks only work if the foundation of your social interaction with the players is working and people are having fun.
That means
I remember it now. It was having fun. You can make a perfectly valid, balanced, reasonable monster that a specific group of players don't find fun. As an example, you could make, as an off the top of my head idea, it's a Harlequin troll, right? It's a troll that is also a jester. That's what the role is. Okay, so I'm imagining an entire court of trolls. There are troll knights and troll kings and troll rangers. So there are Harlequin trolls, and the Harlequin troll has a power where it mocks people and makes them feel bad. And that is a balanced power, and you throw it against the players, and they hate it. And they hate it because they feel like it is not mocking the characters in character, but mocking them as players for bad decisions. And it's annoying, and we're going to defeat it, but it takes forever. And by the way, I'm now envisioning a cave troll from Lord of the Rings, but with a big motley, and it just seems stupid. That kind of disconnect can occur. If you get feedback from people, they can tell you things like, look, I get where you're coming from with the whole court of trolls idea, but this was not fun for me. I hated it. These are the reasons I hated it. Or sometimes you don't even know why you hated it. I didn't have a good time. And if you're sitting there going, oh, well, the next encounter was with 5 motley trolls, so maybe we will replace them with something else. You just have to have that kind of feedback analysis question loop to know, are the things you're doing working? If you have had every monster has had Mighty Blow as a favored stunt, and you're constantly rolling mighty blows, and you're constantly doing tons of damage, and the players are thinking, okay, this is a Mighty Blow game. I'm going to have to build my character with more hit points and more armor rating, regardless of what I wanted to do with my character, because we're always going to get hit with multiple Mighty Blows per fight. There's nothing wrong with Mighty Blow as a favored stunt. It makes perfect sense. But if you are overusing it, or you are overusing it to the taste of your players, you might not know that every time you do that, which you think is a cool, heroic moment, that you're taking the mighty blow and you're still up and you're trying to make them feel good, and they're all quietly rolling their eyes but politely trying not to tell you to stuff you and your mighty blow. You can get bad feelings in a bad game with no idea why. So no matter what you do, especially these rules can set expectations. If players don't know the rules well, if they haven't played it well, they may be bringing expectations from other game systems into this game. So you want to work with them on what does this actually look like, right? Our mage class does not look like a wizard from a D20 D&D Pathfinder game. They have a different trope that they are drawing from. And so if you are expecting that in a few levels I'll be lobbing fireballs and flying and turning invisible and doing all this different stuff, that is not what our mage does. But you will get the ability to have an arcane blast that you can use over and over and over and won't run out of, which is going to look more like a lot of spellcasters in various media, right, that aren't evolved from D20 trope games. So the other thing is that if they are familiar with this and you are deviating from it, you are deviating from an expectation they may have, and you need to warn them about. If you are going to run a fantasy age game where social encounters are more important than combat, that is not the standard expectations from this game system. The game can handle it. It's a perfectly reasonable idea. Some people have a great time, but you should tell them that at that session 0, session -1, so that they can think about, do I really want to play Thrud the Axe Thrower in a game that is going to be about court intrigue? Now, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe they're going to have fun doing the Crocodile Dundee thing and blundering through the court intrigue and trying to find out how many problems, how many negotiations can I fix by throwing axes? And the answer may surprise you. But you still want them to have decided, this is the character I want for this kind of game, not I've built Thrud the Axe Thrower because I want to have a whole bunch of fights where I'm constantly throwing axes into people's faces, and I've built everything to be a master of axe throwing. I'm looking forward to axe throwing, and discover that you're mostly going to be talking about trade embargoes. That can, no matter how good a trade embargo encounter you create, even if it is fun for people that like trade embargo encounters, it may not match the expectations of players who are expecting a typical game.
Gotcha. So here's what I love about these opportunities is that it opens up just so much of it's definitely a look inside of the social engagement, the social contracts that you make, and also understanding that a lot happens outside of your tabletop gaming session that influences all the decisions that you want to make. And, the real protection against sort of being overwhelmed, like, wow, how am I going to know all this stuff, is you ask. You just ask. You talk about it. And you do the session 1, you check in with your players when you go for a bio break, or everyone's getting some, snacks, or you do whatever, and or you pause everybody and say, how's it going? For sure. As Stan says, embargo on.
Little Thunderdome reference there.
Yes, it is.
And I personally find it very useful to hang out with the people I game with sometimes when we're not gaming, so that we can have those conversations not day of, but a few days or possibly a week or two later. If it's an eminent problem, right? If I am arachnophobic and we discover that this is going to be the game about being grabbed and wrapped up by spiders and having the vitreous fluid sucked out of our eyes, I may have to say right here, right now, I got to say, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not going to have a good time. I'm having real issues with this concept. But if it's, hey, you said you wanted a standard fantasy age game, and we opened with this trade embargo, and I just want to say I am cool with that as an occasional thing, and I get it if that was setting up all of the smuggling and blockade running we're going to be doing. But I may have made the wrong character if that's going to be stuff that's happening a lot. That might not be a thought I even have day of. That might be a thought that I have a few days later. And especially if sometimes people get steamed, sometimes tempers rise, just wait for it to all calm down so you can come together and say, okay, we're starting with this. We are all here to help all of us have fun with this encounter. So with that in mind, with that as our starting point, here are the things that aren't working for me. what are our potential solutions? And I like discussing potential solutions because I've had cases where I say, hey, here's the game. Someone makes a character and they come back and say, I made the wrong character for this game. I thought it was a good character idea. I don't like it. Can I just change characters? And I'm like, well, I'm willing to talk about other possibilities. And sometimes the player goes, no, I just made a bad character. I don't like it. I would like to change my characters. Can we work with that? Sure, absolutely. I've done that myself as a player. The flip side of that might be, check with the other players. Make sure that everyone isn't going, yeah, I wish I'd thought to change characters. I'm hating this game.
Right.
Yeah, talk about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, and
goodness,
so one other thing that I want to add to this is that these aren't contracts that people sign in
Right.
blood. And they may, in context,
not for beginner players.
Truth. Yeah, that's the next level stuff. That's the ThursdAGE After Dark. But we talk about, negotiations and sort of connecting with the people around the table, and that can be even further sort of diluted in our sort of modern, when we're doing things via Zoom or playing, via Discord. But it really just boils down to, people can change their mind or get a renewed sense of what's going on because the context of playing is very different than someone explaining it to you. So checking in is really important. Hey, listen, I want to check in with you, Owen, and say we're almost done with this program. I can't even believe it. I was literally like, what happened to the time? And that just always happens. And I love it and I hate it, but I do love this part of it. We are doing some fun stuff this week. This coming Friday, we have it's sort of a pre-set up kind of a pre-stream, we'll call it, for a series of actual plays that we are doing for Beyond the Ring. And that's Ian Lemke is going to be doing some stuff, and he'll be a GM, but we're going to build a system and a kind of a continuation of the stuff we did last ThursdAGE. And for that, we'll be doing that tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific, and whatever that is in your time zone. But that is going to be in preparation for our big stream series, and that stream series is going to have some of our favorite streamers on. Really, really excited about it. Jahan's going to be there. We've got John from Abraxas Precipice, a couple other cast members. I mean, it's going to be a ton of fun, and you're going to be able to see how how Beyond the Ring works and what it's meant to showcase, and you get to see people actually in the thick of it, having some fun. And so don't forget that you can pick up that PDF for $5 if you pick up the pre-order, and pre-orders are happening right this minute. So check that stuff out. We'll see you at that 5 o'clock stream. I think it'll be a couple hours, and then we have 3 more streams after that. That'll be the actual play, which we'll do it at the same time, same day. So Fridays, 5 p.m. and keep an eye out for the notifications there. Anything you got cooking you want to share with the world?
No.
That was a tiny little journey we went on there. So I can see behind your eyes there are things you wish you could say. There are exciting things brewing behind the scenes, and that's just where they brew until they're ready, and then you get to hear all about them. With that being said, do me a favor. Thank you, my friend. Jonesy has dropped the Beyond the Ring hardback pre-order link. Pick it up. Pick up that PDF for $5 and then come hang out with us, and let's build a universe. Well, a system. And then with that, don't forget to hang out with us on Mondays for Mutants and Masterminds Mondays. Same time, same place. It's 2 p.m. Pacific in this very channel. We just kind of change things up. We switch out the skin suit and start the whole thing over again.
We have not yet decided to call it MundAGE, but because there's no age involved. But
that is true.
Mundants and Master Days.
Mundants and Master Days. It has a ring to it. I like it. I'm going to workshop it a bit.
See you, Jahan. It needs a lot of workshopping.
It does indeed. Folks, thank you for hanging out with us today, and for all the days that you hang out. We have a really good time chatting with you. We hope that you enjoy it. Do send us a note at letsplay@greenrona.com with any thoughts, ideas, compliments, peanut butter cake recipes and anything that you might have on your mind. And one of the things that Owen and I have talked about, and it's coming up fairly soon, is we want to talk to some folks who have been submitting things to our Age Creators Alliance. And so if you're interested in that, send me a note or I will come find you and invite you to come hang out with us. And we want to
It's
talk
a
about that.
lot less startling if you contact Troy instead of opening the window and there he is.
Hello. Yeah. Or you can just wait for me to show up. Say my name 3 times and there I am. Owen, you are always, as always, a delight and a treasure. I hope everyone's enjoyed playing Owen Edge, and see us next Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific for another round of this. Until then, have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.